After 6 long years apart, my daughter-in-law surprised me. What she revealed changed everything. Jim stood at his window, watching the autumn leaves swirl outside like memories caught in a gentle breeze. Each day felt heavier than the last since Julia's passing. His beloved wife, with her laughter and warmth, had been the light in his life. Now, as he stared into the empty spaces of their home, he felt the quietness wrap around him like a suffocating blanket. It had been 6 long years since Mark left, following that bitter divorce, the echoes of which haunted every corner of their town. One could only imagine what life would have been like if Anna, his daughter-in-law, hadn't walked away. Their family had been once woven tightly together. Now, the threads lay frayed and thin, unraveling slowly until it felt like they had drifted into different worlds. And there he stood, alone with nothing but his garden and half-formed dreams of teaching art that gathered dust in his mind. He sometimes worried. Had he lost both his son and the daughter he had never fully claimed? The soft thud of a knock on the door startled him from his reverie. It echoed through the stillness, almost like a heartbeat, a reminder that life persisted outside his barricaded walls. With a hesitant sigh, he opened the door, and there she stood, Anna. Her face, once familiar, was now an unknown landscape, framed by the fading light. They embraced, a gesture laden with unspoken regrets and years lost. As they settled into the living room, Anna shared stories of her life since leaving. Her eyes glimmered with pent-up hopes and faded sorrows, creating a poignant portrait of resilience. Each tale sparked something in him, a flicker of the passion he had buried beneath layers of sorrow. Teaching art had always been his dream. Why had he let it slip through his fingers? Mark's struggles wove through their conversation, the raw wounds of unresolved emotions feeling palpable in the air. Jim's thoughts raced as he felt the weight of his own regrets clash with Anna's revelations. Here was a young woman turning pain into beauty, while he remained stuck in his own loss. Why had he not reached out to Mark? Was there still time to bridge the growing chasm that felt so insurmountable? Before the tension could settle too long, Anna mentioned a lost legacy, forgotten painter's brushes and canvases that belonged to Julia. Each word unraveled a new tapestry of family history, reconnecting paths he thought had diverged forever. But with every revelation, moments of desperation filled Jim. What would happen when Mark learned of Anna's visit and the ties it rekindled? Would it heal their family or drive them deeper into the fractures? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The evening deepened as shadows grew longer, pressing around them with every unanswered question. What if the truths they uncovered only deepened the rifts? The air became thick with the uncertainty of their shared history waiting to emerge. As they prepared to delve into the layers of their family's past, Jim's heart raced. What truths lay buried, and could facing them bring redemption or only expose deeper wounds? The weight of what was unsaid hung over them like a storm cloud, promising rain, yet leaving them parched for understanding. Would they dare to confront their family's narrative, or were they destined to remain lost in the shades of regret? In that moment, the flickering light cast long shadows, and Jim trembled on the edge of a revelation that could change everything. Jim's mind raced, juggling the revelations tumbling from Anna's lips like scattered leaves, each more fragile than the last. It was as if the weight of his past rushed toward him with full force, a tide of pent-up emotions crashing at his feet. He felt both frightened and oddly exhilarated. Could this be the moment to change the trajectory of everything? As Anna shared Julia's vibrant experiences as a painter, Jim envisioned her in her studio, paintbrush dancing across a canvas, each stroke a piece of her soul revealed. He remembered the flickers of excitement in her eyes whenever she discussed her next project, how fully alive she had seemed. Shouldn't he have captured that passion, carried it forward for both himself and Anna? Regret gnawed at him, but it urged him to act rather than retreat. "What did you say about her brushes?" he asked, trying to anchor back into their conversation. Anna met his gaze with a mix of seriousness and hope. "They're still in the attic. I think we could find them, Jim. They don't just belong to her. They were a part of us. We could share her story." The candor in her voice softened the jagged edges of his heart. Jim nodded slowly, feeling the familiar tingle of inspiration breaking through his grief. It sparked the desire he thought he'd lost entirely, the very urge that had once compelled him to teach art. Perhaps this was his opportunity, not just to reconnect with memories of Julia, but to forge new ones with Anna. "Let's do it then," he declared, surprising even himself with the fervor in his words. "Let's find those brushes." With a newfound energy flowing between them, the two began their quest up the creaking stairs to the attic. Each dusty step felt like a bridge over the years that had kept them apart. As they reached the dimly lit room, strewn with boxes, cobwebs, and shadows of the past, Jim's heart raced faster. This space, once filled with creativity and laughter, now felt like a treasure trove waiting to be uncovered. He began rummaging through the old boxes, thoughts of Julia's vibrant spirit guiding his hands. Then, nestled beneath a pile of aged fabrics, he saw a box painted with vibrant swirls, a clear indication that it wasn't merely storage, but a snapshot of their shared life. With Anna crouched beside him, they pried open the lid, confronted by the unmistakable scent of linseed oil. Inside lay Julia's brushes, their bristles slightly worn, yet still resonating with the vibrancy of color. Memories rushed back, visions of family gatherings filled with laughter, and moments when art had streamed into the fabric of their lives, intertwined with her creative spirit. "Here they are," Jim murmured, his fingers brushing lightly against the wood of an easel he recognized from years ago. It carried an unfinished painting of a sunset, an echo of Julia's indomitable passion. "Maybe we should finish it together," Anna proposed, her voice hesitant yet laced with excitement. "It could be a place to start." Her suggestion struck a resonant chord that vibrated within him. The very thought of collaborating, of weaving their fractured paths together through colors and paint, ignited something inside him, an impulse to not just recall the past, but to create a future. But as Jim considered the implications, a nagging thought wormed its way into his mind. Would sharing this experience push Mark further away? Would their reconciliation be weighed down by his absence? The diverging paths of family could either forge a deeper bond or open wounds that had never healed. With the brushes clutched in his hand, Jim stood at a crossroads, teetering on the brink of a decision that could change everything. Would he dare to reach out to Mark, reflect on the lessons learned through loss, and extend an olive branch, or retreat into the safety of silence? The thrill of creativity fizzled alongside his uncertainty, and he felt the urgency of making a choice before this moment evaporated. The attic loomed around him, filled with the ghosts of memories tangled in layers of regret. Would he step forward toward an unwritten future, or would fear hold him captive in the past? Jim stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the brushes heavier than the decision pressing against his chest. The attic felt suffocating, shadows whispering of voices long gone but never forgotten. He could feel Anna beside him, the tension in the air radiating with unspoken possibilities. Creativity beckoned, but a different kind of fear held him back. The fear of confrontation, the possibility of deepening the rift with Mark. What if he doesn't want anything to do with this? Jim's voice broke through the silence, revealing the doubt that had curled tightly around his heart. Anna's presence strengthened, a solid anchor against his insecurities. Jim, this is about honoring Julia's memory. It's not just for us. It's a way to remember who she was. A way for Mark to reconnect with her too. He may surprise you with how he feels about it. Her words hung in the heavy air, heavy with both promise and risk. Jim reflected on the years that had flown by, each one marked by silence and distance, like brushstrokes left undone. There had been attempts, of course, moments where he'd considered reaching out to Mark, only to be swallowed by regret and fear of rejection. Maybe he's not waiting for me to reach out. Jim's internal dialogue tangled with worry, painting visions of future conversations that highlighted the bitterness that had lingered. The thought sent a pang of sorrow through him. Could he be the bridge mending what had been left shattered? As he wandered deeper into thoughts of Mark, his resolve began to crystallize. "You're right," he replied slowly, the fear wrapping around his words, loosening its grip. This could mean something to him, something significant. Even if it terrifies me to reach out, I owe it to both mine and Julia's memory to try. Anna smiled, the warmth of her utmost belief radiating. Exactly. This is a gift. And maybe, in sharing the act of creation, it will allow Mark to express feelings that he hasn't shown. It's all intertwined. With the brushes still in his hand, Jim's perspective began to shift. He was no longer just a man haunted by unresolved grief. He was a father who cared about reconnecting with his son. The brushes symbolized a tangible link to the past, but they also represented a portal into the future. "Let's finish that painting then. Together. But I'll call Mark. Get him involved in it too." The thought poured out of him with newfound determination, each word an ember rekindling the hope he thought had dimmed for good. As they cleared a space to work together, the dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the attic window, and the atmosphere felt lighter, electric. With each brushstroke, he hoped to carve a path not just toward rekindling memories, but forging new ones that might lead to reconciliation. The act of creation was both cathartic and revealing. Layer by layer, colors bled into one another, reflecting their collective story. But as the canvas began to fill with life and vibrancy, Jim couldn't shake the gravity of his impending conversation with Mark. What if it only perpetuated the distance? He realized he would have to be prepared for anything. Rejection, anger, fear, each emotion could be part of the path forward just as much as collaboration and love. With the scene of colors blossoming on the canvas, Jim's heart raced not just from excitement, but from anxiety. The vision of the painting merging with memories of Julia stood as both a monumental task and a beacon of hope. As he stepped back to appreciate their joint efforts, he felt a rush of anticipation wash over him. But as the moment arrived, another question loomed. Would Mark even be open to talking? Would he see this for what it was, a chance to mend broken connections? Doubt chased excitement like shadows chasing light. Jim took a deep breath, finding courage not just through motives of creativity, but from the desire to rebuild a family torn apart. The canvas awaited final touches, and he hoped it could soon reflect the rekindled relationship he desperately desired. With a determination born from vulnerability, Jim reached for the phone, ready to embrace whatever awaited, ready to step into a conversation that could redefine them all. But with his thumb hovering over Mark's name, Jim hesitated. Would this act be enough to heal what had been broken, or would it only serve to illuminate the chasm that lay between father and son? The answer loomed ominously as he pressed the call button, gearing up for what could be the most significant moment yet. The phone rang, each tone echoing through Jim's mind like the brushstrokes that had filled the canvas beside him. He swallowed hard, thoughts spiraling into a whirlwind of doubt and determination. What if Mark's voice on the other end only brought back the resentment accumulated over the years? What if the call led to yet another fracture rather than healing? But then there was the canvas, vibrant with colors that mirrored the spectrum of their relationship, a relationship that Jim longed to rejuvenate. His pulse quickened as he imagined what their conversation might hold. Was this the moment he had been waiting for, or a step further into the abyss. Each ring resonated with the echo of Anna's encouragement. She believed in this venture, a reunion built on shared memories surrounding Julia. Would Mark see the beauty in it too? Or would he dismiss it, scoff at the idea of reconnecting through something so fragile yet profound? Then abruptly, the call connected. "Hello?" Mark's voice rang through, deep and distant, like a whisper from a ghost. "Hey, Mark, it's me, Jim," he managed, words tumbling out, nearly unrecognizable against the steady backdrop of his racing heart. A silence fell, taut and jagged. "What do you want?" Mark's response came, clipped and guarded. An unfulfilled yearning surged within Jim. This wasn't just about the phone call, but a chance to show Mark why it all mattered. "I wanted to talk about the painting, the one Julia always loved. Anna and we found the brushes in the attic, and we've begun working on it together." Mark let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "You're telling me you guys just decided to paint together? Now? After all this time?" "Please, just hear me out," Jim urged, grasping for anything that would help bridge the chasm. "This painting is more than just colors. It's a way to remember her. I think—" His voice faltered, pushing through the net of anxiety. "I think it could help us remember who we lost and what we still have." A breath met his ears from the other end, weighty with contemplation. "And you want me to be a part of that? After everything?" "Yes," Jim firmly replied, locking onto the resolve creeping its way into his voice. "We need this. Maybe more than we realize. Let's reconnect, Mark, even if it's messy, even if it hurts. I truly believe it could bring us closer. You're still my son." A heavy pause lingered, the air thickening with uncharted emotions. Jim could almost feel the tumultuous thoughts rattling through Mark's mind. "What do you expect me to say?" he finally asked, a mixture of vulnerability threading through his defensiveness. "That we're just magically okay now because you found some old brushes?" "No, I don't think it will be easy," Jim admitted, raw honesty spilling forth. "But it's a start. It's an opportunity to move beyond the pain. You have the right to be angry, to confuse me with your uncertainty, but just let me try. Let me show you how much this means." The silence stretched, a fragile bridge between hope and fear. Jim's heart raced under the weight of an unspoken agreement. There was everything to lose, but perhaps for the first time, something to gain. "Fine," Mark finally replied, the word laden with skepticism, yet tinged with curiosity. "I'll come by tomorrow, but I'm not promising anything." A wave of relief crashed over Jim, though shadowed by the realization that this was merely the beginning. If reconciliation would take work, he had to be ready to navigate the complex landscape of emotions he and Mark had sidestepped for too long. Would they tread cautiously or plunge headfirst into the depths of their past? Setting down the phone, he turned back to the canvas, now imbued with new significance. Every vibrant hue seemed to pulse with potential, the possibility of transformation hanging thick in the air. With each brushstroke to come, how many unspoken words would they reveal? The anticipation of their meeting filled Jim with a rushed energy unlike anything he had felt in years. But beneath it lay a gnawing question. Could art truly mend what life had frayed, and how far would he have to go to prove its worth? Tomorrow held the keys to doors long barred, and as the evening dimmed, Jim realized he stood on the precipice of something monumental, a confrontation that may either forge a relationship anew or break him down once more. As dawn broke, spilling a muted glow across the living room, Jim found himself impatiently pacing. With each step, the weight of the impending visit pressed down on him, a sensation like a canvas stretched tight, ready to burst. He glanced at the easel, now adorned with a half-finished piece that felt both haunting and hopeful, a reflection of everything at stake. Preparing for Mark's arrival meant more than just setting out brushes and paint. Jim felt an unfamiliar urgency igniting within him. Today was not the day for half measures. Today marked the beginning of a potential healing journey. But how? Questions spun circles in his mind. Would Mark feel the same intensity? Would he simply recount the hurt, the distance? Or could they actually create something meaningful together? Crossing the room, Jim poured a cup of coffee, hoping the caffeine would offer clarity amid the clamor of anxiety. He took a moment, breathing deeply, grounding himself in the present. He had been here before, immersed in both the creation of art and the complexities of fatherhood. Art had often been his refuge, a sanctuary where emotions coursed through every brushstroke, but confronting his son brought forth vulnerabilities he had long avoided. Jim recalled the days when he and Mark had painted side by side, their laughter mingling with the scent of turpentine. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago, overshadowed by years that had turned their once vibrant relationship to gray. What if, amid this brush with the past, he found a way to reassemble the pieces, to merge art and love as a bridge back to one another? The doorbell rang, and Jim's heart leaped into his throat. He poured every ounce of will into steadying his breath, collecting his thoughts, and donning the role of the father he aspired to be today. "Jim?" Mark's voice echoed through the threshold, its hesitance apparent. "Yeah, come in," he replied, trying to mask any tremor in his voice. The door creaked open, and a wave of uncertainty rolled in with Mark, his body language tight and uncertain, every posture resonating with conflicting emotions. As they stood facing each other, the room crackled with an energy tinged with both hope and caution. Jim gestured toward the canvas. "I thought we could start with the painting. Together." Mark's eyes flickered toward the bright colors, then quickly back to his father, masking any interest behind a wall of apprehension. "You really think that'll make a difference?" "I want it to," Jim replied, emboldened by the resolve that had grown within him overnight. "This isn't just about the painting. It's about us." The admission hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, laced with all the fragility of their relationship. Mark scoffed, the walls seemingly strengthening. "You make it sound like it's that easy, like we can just smear some paint around and magically fix everything." "Maybe it's not easy, but it's a start," Jim countered, steadying himself against the familiar doubt. The earlier hesitation threatened to creep back as he remembered their history, an array of arguments, missed calls, and tense silences that suffocated their exchanges. "Come on, Mark. If you never try, you'll never know." Moments passed, the tension thick and palpable, yet rippling with something deeper, a potential for expression, revelation, and perhaps understanding. Jim dared to hope. "Fine." Mark finally relented, his tone barely above a whisper. Yet in the shadow of that refusal was a flicker of willingness, a seed planted amid the uncertainty. Together, they gathered the scattered brushes and tubes of paint, side by side in a hesitant standoff. As the first strokes landed awkwardly upon the canvas, Jim could feel the tension in Mark's movements, the stunted release of emotions long repressed. Each color blended and collided, a struggle for harmony reflective of their own. Jim dared to break the silence. "Do you remember when we used to sit outside and paint?" he asked, searching for recognition in Mark's eyes. "It was so long ago," Mark replied, his voice softened by nostalgia. "I remember, though. It was nice." "Let's make it nice again," Jim suggested, channeling all the hope he could muster. He knew that repair wouldn't be instant. Layers of unresolved feelings required meticulous attention and patience. Yet, as the first smudges of color spread across the canvas, an unexpected warmth began to swell in Jim's chest. The act of creation began to lift the mount of fear that had gripped him. Could this be their chance? Would art open new channels of connection, making way for what had long been buried? With each brushstroke, Jim felt both the enormity and the immediacy of their shared histories looming heavily, but something clicked. Maybe this was how they would confront the pain of the past, through art rather than silence. But just as Jim began to feel a flicker of hope, Mark turned to him with an expression that blended uncertainty with something more sinister. "What if we paint something entirely different? something that represents what is really between us? The question felt like a challenge and a doorway into uncharted territory. Jim's heart raced at the prospect, but what lay ahead felt daunting, a poignant confrontation with their truths yet to be uncovered. Each question layered delicately atop the other, stirring the pot of previously unexpressed emotions. Could they really paint their way through the darkness? The moment had arrived to face not just their art, but the reality of their strained relationship, and Jim could only brace himself for what was to come. Mark's suggestion hung in the air, a sharp blade slicing through the delicate threads of potential connection that had just begun to weave between them. Jim's heart hammered in his chest as he processed the weight of the moment. The blank canvas seemed to embody not just a creative opportunity, but a raw canvas for the truths they had danced around for years. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully, as if stepping onto unstable ground. Mark hesitated, flicking his eyes away as if unwilling to confront the tempest brewing inside. "What if we paint a representation of our distance, everything we've avoided?" There was an edge to his voice, laced with bitterness rather than curiosity. It mirrored the ache that had settled deep in Jim's stomach. The very notion of laying bare their struggles felt terrifying, yet Jim couldn't deny the truth in Mark's words. The years of silence, of pain left unspoken, demanded acknowledgement. How could they hope to heal without revealing what had fractured their bond in the first place? "Okay," Jim conceded, a sense of resolve weaving its way in. "Let's start with that. What does distance look like to you?" Mark took a step back, crossing his arms, the defensiveness once again coating him like armor. The silence stretched. Jim could almost hear the gears turning in Mark's mind. He watched those familiar expressions flicker across his son's face, the uncertainty, the fear. But beneath that, an urge, a curiosity to explore what was too painful to articulate. "It feels like a fog," Mark finally said, his voice steadier now. "Thick and gray. I don't even know how to cut through it." A sudden rush of emotion flooded Jim as he reached for a dark gray paint. "Then let's start with that." He selected a broad brush, making sweeping strokes to mimic swirling fog across the canvas, feeling the weight of the color resonate with his own memories of anguish. Each movement poured a piece of his heart into the work that felt both excruciating and liberating. Mark hesitated, his hands hovering above the palette as he watched Jim. "Are you sure you want me to do this?" It was a vulnerable moment. "Yes," Jim replied, forcing himself to hold Mark's gaze. "We cannot paint over the past without facing what we've been through. You need to express your truths, the ones you've kept buried." Mark's fingers eventually dipped into the heavy paint, and his initial strokes echoed Jim's movements, though with a sense of hesitance. For a heartbeat, they started to dance together, though it was a hesitant waltz around uncharted feelings. Through art, Mark began to draw lines representing years lost. Thin marks, some jagged, others smooth. Each line carved out time that had slipped away, echoing the silence they had endured. But as the canvas filled with deeper shades of gray, Jim noticed a tension flickering in Mark's eyes, shadows of resentment mingling with vulnerability. Jim wanted to understand, to probe beneath the surface, yet each question felt like a pin poised over a balloon ready to burst. "Mark," he said cautiously, "when did the distance really start for you? Was it that day I—" Mark flinched, and the answer sat poised on the edge of his lips, an answer loaded with bitterness and hurt, a truth that threatened to unravel everything. "When you just stopped trying," he interrupted, backing away from the canvas, a retreat into the emotional fog he had just painted. The word struck Jim hard, a gut punch of undeniable reality. Had he truly stopped trying? In his effort to protect himself, was that what had happened? The realization detonated in his mind. Mark had faced a different battle throughout their years of silence. But with each revelation came an insidious self-doubt. Could he genuinely navigate this minefield of emotions they were unearthing together? Were the layers of grief and resentment truly surfacing, or merely an illusion swirled in paint? Seeing the tightening of Mark's jaw, Jim decided to press on, leaning into the vulnerability. What if we can change that? What if we can actually begin to bridge that distance, the fog? Mark turned to him, the uncertainty morphing into a searching gaze. You really think we can? What if this is the moment we confront it all? Jim asked, internal fire igniting once more. This canvas is ours to claim. Let's not shy away from what lies between us. Rather, let's paint over it. Just then, a hesitant smile broke through Mark's stoic facade, igniting a flicker of hope. The tension began to lift, but Jim couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest strokes were still yet to come. As they both reached for brighter colors, a wave of determination surged within. The daunting task ahead felt electric with possibility, but the shadows lurked still, lurking just beneath the surface of their art. A deeper reckoning awaited. Could Jim outpace his own fears long enough to grasp the lessons of their painful past? Could the canvas carry them where words had long failed? As paint coated the surface, Jim's heart raced at what truths might be unearthed beneath those vibrant layers. Was Mark really ready to delve deeper, or would once again they be met with silence, a temptation to revert back to ignorance and unseen wounds? The most significant brushstrokes were yet to come. Jim dipped his brush into a vivid cerulean blue, the hue reminiscent of a clear sky after a storm. It felt like an invitation to replace the oppressive gray with something vibrant and filled with promise. Each stroke on the canvas was a visceral act of defiance against the turbulent feelings swirling around him. Let's blend this in, he suggested, a spark igniting within him as he reached for the palette again. Blue can bring clarity. Maybe it represents our hope, our need to clear the air. Mark looked hesitant but intrigued. Do you really think we can? What if it just turns muddy? His brows furrowed as if considering the ramifications of such raw expression. Or, Jim countered, it could become something entirely new. That's the beauty of art, isn't it? It can transform. The words held weight, not just as encouragement to Mark, but as a personal rallying cry. Transforming was what he longed for, too, a metamorphosis from the quiet suffering they both had endured. As Mark leaned in close, dipping his own brush into the cerulean, their shoulders brushed against each other. With each stroke, the canvas shifted from an oppressive fog to a dance of colors, embodying the complexities of their relationship. Mark's initial hesitance began to recede, his strokes growing bolder, laced with emotion. What do you think this means? Mark asked, glancing at Jim as if seeking a deeper understanding of the connection they were forging through color. Are we really getting somewhere? The question hung heavy in the air. Jim felt the vulnerability surge within him, fanning out around the newfound energy. Only if we let ourselves be candid, he replied. Art can lay bare our truths. Are you ready to face them? His heart thundered in his chest, a mixture of anxiety and excitement as he waited for Mark's response. Mark paused, his brow knitting together as uncertainty washed over his features again. What if I can't find the words? His voice wavered, laying bare the echoes of the past, the years of silence, the mounting resentment of unshared pain. Jim took a breath, grounding himself. Then let's paint the silence. Every hesitation, every unspoken thought, let's visualize that too. The idea seemed to catch Mark by surprise, lighting a flicker of recognition in his eyes. You mean, just like we did with the fog? Exactly. We can't just paint over what's been there. It'll show through, Jim encouraged. But maybe if we put it into color, even if it's dark, we can reclaim it somehow. Slowly, Mark nodded, dipping his brush again, this time returning to the deep gray, tracing the outlines of jagged lines and stark contrasts. Jim felt a shudder of apprehension course through him, both for his son's emotional vulnerability and his own. But there was no turning back now. This was the path to healing, however tumultuous. As their words began to bubble up alongside their paint, The conversation drifted toward childhood memories. Moments of joy fused uncomfortably with those of neglect. Jim held on to every mention, absorbing the sweet and bitter, painting them vibrantly across the canvas. Mark spoke of anger and confusion, feelings Jim had somehow overlooked during his attempts to shield them. "Why didn't we do this sooner?" Mark's voice trembled as a new revelation broke through. "I always thought if I waited, it would just go away." Jim's heart clenched at the admission. It echoed his own fears and regrets. "I thought the same thing. But it only grew, didn't it? Like a weed choking out the flowers." It was a harrowing admission, one that felt both powerful and painful. "But can we get back to those flowers? Cultivate what we had?" Mark's question lay vulnerable in the air, gauging the depths of their potential reconciliation. Jim's pulse quickened, his heart alight with a flicker of determination. "We can. It'll take effort and honesty, but if we clear the weeds and acknowledge everything, we can grow something beautiful together." Mark hesitated again, eyes trained on the swirling chaos of color they had just created. The hope reflected in the varying shades around them seemed palpable, fragile yet miraculous. But as they paused to step back and examine their work, the unspoken fears hung heavily like tendrils of fog lingering in the background. Would this newfound connection endure the truths they uncovered? Collecting strength, Jim picked up a vibrant yellow with a steady resolve. "Let's add warmth. We need to crown this with a layer of light, but I have to ask you, are you ready to paint your truth?" Mark's eyes bore the weight of choice, reflecting uncertainty and longing. The silence stretched once more, underscoring the delicate precipice upon which they stood. Just then, a knock echoed at the studio door, startling them both. Caught off guard, they exchanged glances, and Jim's stomach knotted. The interruption felt unwelcome. Who was it, and what would it bring? An unwanted distraction or a chance encounter? "Are you ready for this?" Jim whispered, a sense of impending confrontation pressing heavily between them. The moment felt electric, suggesting that change was imminent. Would they tackle the waves of truth together, or would fate step in, shifting their resolve once more? As the knock resonated, a surge of tension rippled through Jim's body. The studio, once a sanctuary of color and creativity, now felt like a stage set for an impending confrontation. Mark's expression mirrored his apprehension, a mix of anticipation and fear. "Who could it be?" Mark whispered, his voice barely above a breath, as if speaking too loudly could shatter the fragile atmosphere they had begun to build. Jim felt a flicker of annoyance. They were on the edge of something significant, grappling with truths that had long remained buried. But there was no stopping the insistent knock. It repeated, louder this time, demanding attention and disrupting their delicate dance of healing. "Let me check," Jim replied, his curiosity intertwining with his rising anxiety. He set his brush down reluctantly, eyes still lingering on the vibrant canvas that held remnants of their shared struggles and victories. As he opened the door, the cool air of the hallway rushed in, contrasting sharply with the warmth of their art-filled space. Jim's breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was Karen, his former wife, Mark's mother. Her presence, unexpected and unsettling, stirred a cocktail of emotions inside him: joy, regret, and a lingering sorrow that refused to dissipate. "Karen," he said, mired in disbelief, "what are you doing here?" Her eyes flickered past him, searching for Mark. I need to talk to both of you." There was urgency in her tone, a desperate need that set Jim on edge. He felt as if she were a disruptive storm, ready to unravel the fragile peace he had begun to forge with Mark. "Can it wait?" he asked straight out, the protective instinct rising like a tide. They were in the middle of something. They were working toward healing, and yet here was an unresolved chapter from a different time, demanding to be acknowledged. But Mark, stepping into the doorway beside his father, looked between them, his expression a blend of confusion and longing. "No, it's okay, Dad," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. "I want to hear what she has to say." Jim's heart sank. He should have known their turbulent history still tethered Mark to Karen, a connection neither of them could completely sever. "Mark, are you sure?" The question emerged, laced with concern. "I need to know," Mark insisted, determination igniting in his eyes. Maybe she has something to say that could help us." The decision was made. There was no going back. Reluctantly, Jim stepped aside, allowing Karen to enter, the air thick with unresolved tension. They settled around a small table cluttered with paint tubes and brushes, the remnants of their artistic endeavor. "I've realized that I need to take responsibility for my role in our past," Karen started, her voice shaky as she cast a glance at Mark. "I've spent so long blaming others, including you, Jim. But I've come to understand that I played a part in our family's unraveling." Jim felt a surge of frustration. He had expected an apology, perhaps even a tearful reconciliation, but this felt raw. She hadn't changed all that much, had she? The words flowed out of her, but did she truly grasp the emotional damage that lingered? Why now? After all this time? Jim's voice was barely above a whisper, reflecting the bitterness of lingering pain. "I've been in therapy," she confessed, eyes tracing the painted canvas that told a story of hurt and hope. "I am learning to confront my mistakes, and I can't hide from our truths anymore." Mark's eyes were wide, soaking in this new revelation. The once bitter resentment began to fade, replaced by an unexpected glimmer of understanding. "So, you're saying you want to try again?" Karen nodded, her face etched with a blend of hope and fear. "I want to be part of your lives again, but only if you both are willing." The silence that followed was heavy. Jim felt the walls closing in around him, his heart racing at the implications. Was this a chance for reconciliation, or yet another pathway to deeper frustration? Mark turned to his father, searching for guidance, but Jim's inner turmoil made words difficult to manage. He understood the importance of forgiveness as a step toward liberation, yet he worried. Was it truly possible to embrace this newfound possibility, or was history destined to repeat itself? Caught in a tempest of emotions, Jim realized he was not just confronting Karen's return. He was facing his own reluctance to embrace change. Could he allow himself to paint over another layer of their shared history, one steeped in pain and regret? "I can't just forget the past," Jim finally said, his voice low but clear. "We all have to be honest about what we've done. Are you prepared to face that?" Karen's expression faltered, her facade of confidence cracking as uncertainty flooded her gaze. Mark's anticipation hung in the background, waiting for a resolution to the conflict now spiraling out of their control. In that charged moment, Jim squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of their shared journey. Perhaps this meeting was more than a confrontation. It was an opportunity for all of them to shed the past and paint a new narrative together. But would they navigate it with grace and honesty, or allow it to drown under the weight of unresolved feelings? As the tension lay thick, an inevitability washed over Jim. The moment of truth had arrived, with the potential to reshape their lives forever. Would they rise to the challenge, or would they allow their history to dictate their future? Every eye in the room turned to Jim, waiting for his answer, and it dawned on him that this was only the beginning of a far darker and complex journey ahead. Jim held his breath, the weight of Mark's and Karen's expectant gazes pressing down on him. It felt surreal, as if he were standing on a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown. "I can't forget the past," he repeated, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Karen's face blanched, and for a moment the hope that had flickered in her eyes dimmed. "I understand, Jim, but I've spent so many years running from it. I can't hide anymore." Redirecting his focus, Jim searched for the right words. What truth could he offer that would resonate with both of them? "A single conversation can't change everything, Karen. We've lived with these shadows for so long. Are you ready to accept the consequence of your past choices? Mark watched, his face a mixture of longing and uncertainty, and in that moment, Jim realized what a tightrope they were all walking. Each word carried with it the potential to either forge a new path or to plunge them back into the darkness they had desperately tried to escape. I want to, Karen said, her voice trembling yet laced with determination. I've made mistakes. I know that now. Part of my therapy has been recognizing that. I want to make amends. Words are just that unless backed by action, Jim replied, surprised by his own forcefulness. What does making amends look like for you? With her eyes glistening, Karen visibly steeled herself. I'm willing to be accountable. I want to meet with you both regularly. I'll show you through my actions that I can be a different person, a better mother. But I need to know we can create a platform of trust. Jim felt the irony. A few years ago, the mere mention of Karen would set a fire inside him. Now, he faced her with the complexity of their shared history swirling in his mind. She was asking for a chance, and for Mark's sake, he needed to consider it. What if we try? Mark interjected, his youthful urgency clashing with the years of hurt in the room. What if we start small? Jim's heart softened. This was his son, still searching for the mother he had lost and desperate for the scraps of a family they once had. Does that mean you'll hold her accountable too? He asked, turning to Mark. It's not just about welcoming her back. You have to be clear on what boundaries you need. Mark nodded vigorously, tears welling in his eyes. I want to feel safe getting to know you again, Mom. I've waited too long for this. As Jim struggled to keep his focus on the conversation, his own vulnerabilities inched closer to the surface, challenging his resolve. Fine, we'll give this a shot. But let's be real about it. We may need outside support. A therapist who can help navigate through this, Jim suggested, pulling the final pieces of an agreement together. Of course, Karen replied, relief flooding her features. Whatever it takes. Feeling a subtle shift in the dynamic, Jim sensed that they were taking the first, tentative steps toward something crucial, but in that same breath, his body tensed as the anxiety of uncertain outcomes crept into his mind. What if this doesn't work? Jim whispered, almost to himself. But both Mark and Karen heard, and the weight of that honesty hung between them. Then we try again, Mark replied, a flicker of hope igniting in his tone. It was unsettling to think how rapidly they had exchanged warmth for vulnerability, and Jim felt that heavy pull of responsibility. He couldn't shake his fear that they might stumble again, fall back into old patterns. The corrective journey ahead required not just honesty, but courage from all involved. All right then, Jim said, forcing his voice to steady. If we're moving ahead, it needs to be with authenticity. No more hiding. As Mark reached for his mother's hand across the table, Jim's chest felt both heavy and light. Familiar patterns were breaking. The thought excited and filled him with dread. Could they really embark on this collective journey of healing while still fighting their ingrained instincts? Everything shifted again. And suddenly he was gripped by the next series of decisions looming over them. The ghosts of their history still lingered, threatening to stifle any possibility of progression. What if they found themselves lost again in the labyrinth of old grievances? Would they rise from the ashes, or would the darkness from their past clutch them back into oblivion? As Jim contemplated those questions, the studio felt charged with a new energy, a fragile resilience poised on the brink of transformation. But beneath the surface remained a fearful undertow, whispering the uncertainties that remained. The moment of commitment loomed closer, and the challenge now felt palpable. Would they finally reconcile their pasts and forge a future together, or were they doomed to repeat the cycles that had defined their lives? With tension in every heartbeat, Jim whispered a silent prayer for strength, ready to embrace the possibility of moving forward, even if it meant surrendering to the unknown. Jim stood in the glow of the rising sun, the warmth washing over him as he reveled in the beauty of the new day. The reality of the previous day's emotional upheaval settled in him like fresh paint on a canvas, bold, raw, and full of potential. This was no ordinary morning. It marked the day after confronting the past. Mark and Karen had returned for a second meeting, an evident vulnerability weaving through them. With each conversation, the bonds of their familial ties began unfurling, slowly but surely, from the tangles of hurt and misunderstanding. Together, they listened as they painted, talking not just about expectations and fears, but also about memories of Julia, laughter, and lost moments. Jim felt an unexpected lightness in his heart, a flicker of optimism that had long eluded him. "Let's finish that painting today," he suggested, remembering the visual representation they began the day before. Mark hesitated briefly before nodding, his gaze brightened with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "Yeah, let's do it. But this time, let's add something deeper. We need to incorporate everything we've confronted." As they turned to the canvas, Jim's chest swelled with pride at how Mark was channeling his emotions onto the surface. The colors bloomed, reflecting both the turmoil of their past and the hope for the future. Each stroke became a testament to their willingness to break free from the constraints of silence, moving toward unity. "Remember the vibrant sunsets Mom always pulled us outside to see?" Mark mused as he dipped his brush into a bold orange, merging it carefully with the blues and greens on the canvas. "Maybe we should make that our backdrop." The suggestion struck a chord as Jim recalled the family's shared joy in those golden hours. "Absolutely. Let's capture that light." He felt empowered to weave a narrative that spoke of vibrant possibilities rather than fragmented memories. As the afternoon wore on, Karen stepped forward, resolving to add her touch. "I want to bring a reminder of gratitude into our piece, something to reflect how important you both are to me, even through all the mess we've made." She picked up a golden hue, blending it into a cascade of colors that symbolized warmth and connection. Jim watched, amazed at how the act of creating art became a healing process. Each brushstroke healed invisible wounds, binding them together as they confronted truth. Mark, Karen, and Jim intermingled their voices, sharing laughter, grief, and the fragility of their journey. With the last strokes on the canvas, a sense of accomplishment enveloped Jim, a profound satisfaction that their efforts were not in vain. The painting stood proudly before them, a storyline that encapsulated the ghosts of their past while illuminating a clear path toward a more colorful future. "All right," Jim finally declared, stepping back to regard their combined effort. "This isn't just a painting anymore. It's a celebration of our rebirth, our commitment to healing." Mark stepped alongside Jim, a newfound confidence shining through him. "Are you two really ready for this? I mean, can we keep this open dialogue going?" Jim smiled, the warmth of familial ties wrapping around him like a long-lost embrace. "Absolutely. We're rebuilding our foundation. It's time to incorporate honesty into our family again. No more hiding." As they gazed collectively at the finished piece, Jim felt a swell of hope ignite within him, grounded in the realization that they could redefine their story. Vulnerability had bridged the chasm between them, illuminated by their willingness to face the unknown. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant echoes of their canvas, an emblem of love, struggle, connection, and forgiveness, Jim embraced the transformation he had undergone. It had taken grief, art, and raw honesty to arrive here, but the journey proved worthwhile. They could do this. The potential for growth shimmered brightly in the air. Stepping forward into a brighter narrative with Mark and Karen, Jim held not just his son's hand, but also a larger piece of his heart, mended and renewed. It was time to step beyond the past, into a future filled with color. He was ready to paint anew. As he turned to them, he said, "Now let's spread this message far and wide." This was not just their story anymore. It was a chance to inspire others, to share how confronting the unspoken truths could lead to profound transformation. And as they returned to the easel for new beginnings, Jim made a silent vow. Never again would silence define them. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can change lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, making sure more people get to witness transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Share your insights because they matter. And above all, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to inspire someone with the message of hope today.